The ledger page trembled in Eleanor Price's hands as she stared at the numbers that made no sense. Her life savings reduced to nothing but a column of zeros and fabricated fees she had never authorized. She stood in the dusty street outside the San Andreas Bank in California, the afternoon sun beating down mercilessly on this spring day in 1882, and felt her entire world crumbling around her like the dry earth beneath her worn boots. Eleanor had saved every penny for 3 years, working as a seamstress in this rough mining town that had sprung up along the goldfields. 24 years old and alone after her father's death from pneumonia the previous winter, she had planned to use that money to expand her dress shop, to finally have something of her own in this harsh territory where women had to fight twice as hard for half the respect. $2,000, earned through countless late nights straining her eyes by lamplight, through pricked fingers and aching shoulders. Gone. The banker, a portly man named Cornelius Haverton, with slicked back hair and a gold watch chain that spoke of wealth he had not earned through honest labor, had smiled at her with cold eyes when she confronted him inside. He had explained in condescending tones about investment opportunities he had taken on her behalf, high-risk ventures that had failed, though she had never signed anything authorizing such actions. When she demanded proof, he had produced documents with what looked like her signature, though Eleanor knew she had never put pen to those papers. The forgery was good enough that she feared no court would believe a seamstress over a respected banker. "I suggest you accept your losses gracefully, Miss Price," Haverton had said, adjusting his spectacles. "These things happen in business. Perhaps stick to your needlework and leave financial matters to those who understand them." Now she stood outside, clutching the false statement, wondering how she would pay next month's rent on her shop, how she would buy fabric for the orders she had already promised to fill. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back furiously. She had not survived her father's death, had not built a business from nothing in this rough territory, only to cry in the street like a helpless child, "You look like someone just stole your horse." The voice came from behind her, deep and warm with a hint of concern that cut through her despair. Eleanor turned to find a man watching her from where he leaned against a hitching post, his hat tilted back enough to reveal sun-weathered features and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He was tall, built lean and strong, like someone who spent his days in the saddle, and dust covered his clothes as though he had ridden far. A cowboy, clearly, though something in his bearing suggested he was more than just a drifter. "Worse!" Eleanor said before she could stop herself. "Someone stole 3 years of my life." The cowboy straightened, his expression sharpening with interest and anger both. "That's so? Anybody I can help you shoot?" Despite everything, Eleanor felt a ghost of a smile touch her lips. "I appreciate the offer, but shooting a banker in broad daylight tends to end poorly for the shooter." "Haverton?" The cowboy's voice hardened, and he stepped closer, studying her face with sudden intensity. "Let me guess. He invested your money without asking, lost it all, and now you have got nothing but a paper full of lies." Eleanor stared at him, hope kindling in her chest like a spark catching dry tinder. "You know about this? Has he done this before?" "Name's Wade Edwards," he said, extending his hand. "And yes, I know about Cornelius Haverton's particular brand of theft. My sister lost her inheritance to him 2 years back, $500 that was supposed to see her through until she married. By the time I got to town, she had already left for San Francisco to work in a factory because she couldn't afford to stay. I have been working cattle drives, saving up to come back and make things right." Eleanor shook his hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and honest labor, so different from Haverton's soft, grasping fingers. "Eleanor Price, I had $2,000 this morning. Now I have nothing." Wade's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath his beard-shadowed skin. 2,000? That snake has gotten bolder. When I left, I swore I would come back with enough to hire a lawyer, to expose him properly, but maybe there is another way." "What way?" Eleanor asked, though part of her already knew the answer from the dangerous light in Wade's eyes. "I told you, shooting him would be—" "Not shooting. Wade interrupted. But Haverton is not just a thief. He is a coward. I did some asking around before I left town last time. Talked to some folks who knew his history. He came here from Sacramento with debts chasing him, set himself up as a banker with money that was not his to begin with. There are people back there who would be very interested to know where he ended up. Eleanor's mind raced, processing this information. You want to blackmail him? I want to make him return what he stole, Wade corrected. From you, from my sister, from however many others he has cheated. But I need proof, and I need leverage. You still have access to your account? I suppose so, though there is nothing in it. But you have reason to be in the bank, to ask questions, to maybe distract Haverton while someone else looks around his office. Wade's smile was not pleasant, but it was directed at the banker, not at her, and Eleanor found herself warming to this stranger who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. That would be illegal, she said slowly. So is forging someone's signature and stealing their life savings. Wade stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen, Miss Price, I understand if you want no part of this. You can go to the sheriff, try the legal way. But Sheriff Morrison banks with Haverton, gets loans from him at favorable rates. I asked around about that too before I left. The law in this town is not going to help you. Eleanor looked down at the ledger page in her hands, at the lies printed there in neat columns. She thought of the dresses she had promised to make, of Mrs. Chin who needed her daughter's wedding gown finished by next month, of young Sarah Miller who had ordered her first grown-up dress for the spring social. She thought of her father, who had taught her that honest work deserved honest reward, and of how he would feel knowing some banker had stolen everything she had built. What do you need me to do? She asked. Wade's expression softened, respect joining the anger there. Meet me tonight after dark, behind the general store. I need to talk to some people, see what I can learn. And Miss Price, thank you for trusting me. I know I am just a stranger. A stranger who cares about justice, Eleanor said. That makes you less of a stranger than most people I know. She watched him walk away, leading a paint horse from the hitching post, moving with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. Then she turned back toward her shop, her mind already working through possibilities and plans. She had work to do, dresses to finish regardless of whether she could afford new fabric, and now she had something else too. Hope, dangerous and bright and worth holding on to. The afternoon passed in a blur of needle and thread, but Eleanor's thoughts kept drifting to Wade Edwards and his offer of help. She knew nothing about him beyond his name and his sister's story, yet something in his steady gaze and honest anger had reached past her defenses. He could be lying, could be planning to rob her of what little she had left, but her instincts said otherwise. Her father had always told her to trust her gut, and her gut said Wade was exactly what he appeared to be, a man who had watched someone he loved get hurt and refused to let it stand. When the sun finally set and darkness crept through San Andreas, Eleanor closed her shop and made her way carefully through the back streets. The town was rowdy at night, full of miners spending their earnings in saloons and gambling halls, and she kept her head down and her hand on the small knife she carried in her pocket. A woman alone after dark was taking risks, but then again, she had already risked everything by trusting a banker with her savings. Wade was waiting behind the general store as promised, but he was not alone. 2 other men stood with him, one old and grizzled with a prospector's rough appearance, the other young and Chinese, dressed in the simple clothes of a laborer. Eleanor hesitated, but Wade stepped forward immediately, his hand raised in a peaceful gesture. Miss Price, these are friends. This is Samuel Cooper, been mining these hills since before San Andreas was anything but a creek and a prayer. And this is James Chin, whose family runs the restaurant on 3rd Street. Eleanor recognized the name. Mrs. Chen is making her daughter's wedding dress with me. James Chen nodded, his expression grim. My mother told me she hired you. She also told me our family's savings are gone. Haverton took everything 3 months ago, said he was investing it in a new mine shaft. There is no mine shaft. We have been working every day just to keep the restaurant open and afford my sister's wedding. The pieces were falling into place, and Eleanor felt her anger building again, hot and righteous. How many others? At least a dozen families that I have found so far, Samuel Cooper said, his voice like gravel. Probably more who are too ashamed to admit they got taken. Haverton's been doing this for at least 3 years, ever since he opened that bank. Small amounts mostly, from people who cannot fight back, minors who do not read English well, Chinese families who fear deportation if they make trouble, women like you who the law does not take serious. We take him down tonight, Wade said, and there was steel in his voice that made Eleanor believe he could do exactly that. I spent the day watching the bank. Haverton stays late every Wednesday, counting his money, making sure his books look clean for the week. He is there now, alone. The night guard does not start his rounds until 10. What's the plan? Eleanor asked, her heart hammering, but her voice steady. Wade looked at her with something like admiration. You walk in the front door. Tell him you thought about what he said, that you want to apologize for making a scene. Keep him talking in the main room. Meanwhile, Samuel knows the building because he helped construct it. There is a back window that does not latch proper. James and I go in that way, get into his office, find the real books. How do you know there are real books? Eleanor asked. Because men like Haverton cannot help themselves, Samuel said with grim certainty. He will have records of what he really did, where the money really went. Probably thinks he is clever, probably has it in some kind of code. But James here reads and writes 4 languages and is better with numbers than any banker. James' chin nodded. I wanted to be an accountant before the laws changed and they stopped letting Chinese people have professional positions. Now I keep books for my family's restaurant and do mathematics for entertainment. It was a terrible plan, full of risks and illegal acts that could land them all in jail. It was also the only plan they had, and Eleanor was tired of being helpless. How long do I need to keep him talking? 10 minutes, Wade said. Maybe 15 if we have trouble with the lock on his office. Can you do that? Eleanor thought of 3 years of work, of every dress she had sewn and every customer she had served, of her father's pride when she had told him about her savings. I can do that. But Wade, if something goes wrong, if he realizes what is happening. Then you run, Wade said firmly. Straight out that door and you do not look back. We will handle Haverton. There was a protection in his voice that made Eleanor's chest tighten with an emotion she did not have time to examine. She nodded once, sharply, and started toward the bank before her courage could fail. The main street was still busy despite the late hour, and Eleanor walked quickly, her head high. The bank loomed ahead, its brick facade looking solid and respectable in the lamplight. Through the window, she could see Haverton at his desk, exactly as Wade had predicted, bent over a ledger with a pen in his hand. Eleanor pushed open the door, the bell chiming loudly in the quiet space. Haverton looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation as he recognized her. Miss Price, the bank is closed. Come back tomorrow during proper hours. I wanted to apologize, Eleanor said, forcing the words past her pride. For my outburst earlier. You were right. I do not understand business matters, and I should not have questioned your decisions. Haverton's irritation faded, replaced by smug satisfaction. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Well, I appreciate your coming to your senses, my dear. It takes a wise woman to admit when she is out of her depth. The condescension in his voice made Eleanor's hands clench, but she kept her expression meek and stepped closer to his desk. Behind the bank, Wade and the others would be entering now, moving through the shadows toward Haverton's private office. She needed to keep the banker's attention completely on her. I was hoping, she said hesitantly, playing the part of a confused woman seeking male guidance, that you might explain to me exactly what happened, so I can understand for the future. The investments you mentioned, what were they? Haverton preened, clearly enjoying the opportunity to demonstrate his supposed expertise. Of course, of course. You see, Miss Price, when one has capital sitting idle, the prudent thing is to put it to work. I identified several promising ventures: a silver mine in Nevada, a shipping concern in San Francisco, a cattle ranch in Arizona, all perfectly legitimate business opportunities. And they all failed? Eleanor asked, letting doubt creep into her voice. Unfortunately, yes. Such is the nature of risk. But I assure you, my dear, every decision was made with your best interests at heart. Eleanor wanted to spit in his lying face, but she forced herself to nod thoughtfully. I see. And you said you had documents showing my authorization? Indeed. Haverton pulled open a drawer, withdrawing a folder. Right here, your signature clear as day. He pushed the papers across the desk, and Eleanor leaned over to examine them, genuinely curious now about how good the forgery was. Her own signature stared back at her from 3 different documents, and she had to admit the hand was skilled. Almost perfect, except the loop on the E was slightly too large, and the final flourish on the price did not quite match her usual style. This is not my signature, she said quietly. Haverton's expression hardened. I beg your pardon? This is not my signature, Eleanor repeated, louder now. Someone forged these documents. You forged these documents. How dare you? Haverton sputtered, standing up. I will not be accused of fraud by some seamstress with delusions of competence. Get out of my bank. Your bank? Eleanor stood her ground, anger overwhelming caution. Your bank that you opened with stolen money? Your bank where you forge signatures and steal from people who trusted you? Haverton's face went pale, then flushed dark red. You have no proof of anything. Now get out before I call the sheriff and have you arrested for slander. Call him, Eleanor said, her voice ringing with fury she no longer bothered to hide. Call Sheriff Morrison and explain to him why 12 families have lost their savings under your care. Explain to him where all that money really went. For a moment, Haverton just stared at her, and Eleanor saw fear flicker behind his eyes. Then he lunged around the desk, grabbing her arm hard enough to bruise. You stupid woman, you have no idea what you are interfering with. The door to Haverton's office opened, and Wade Edwards stepped out with James Chen behind him. Wade held a ledger book, and his expression was deadly calm. Let go of her, Wade said, his voice quiet but carrying a weight of violence barely restrained. Right now. Haverton released Eleanor's arm and stumbled backward, his face going from red to white. This is breaking and entering. I will have you arrested. With this? Wade held up the ledger. James, tell the nice banker what we found. James Chen's voice was hard with controlled rage, a complete accounting of every theft for the past 3 years. Names, amounts, dates, including where the money actually went. Real estate purchases in Sacramento under a false name. A mistress in San Francisco receiving monthly payments. Loans to gambling establishments where you hold partnership stakes. You have been stealing from your depositors and using their money to build yourself a second life. That is private property, Haverton said, but his voice shook. You cannot. We already did, Samuel Cooper said, emerging from the office with an armful of additional documents. And we made copies, real thorough ones. James has a beautiful hand for writing. Haverton looked at the 3 men, then at Eleanor, and she saw the moment he realized he was trapped. His shoulders slumped and he sank back into his chair. What do you want? He asked dully. Every penny you stole, Wade said, returned to every person you took it from. Tomorrow. That is impossible. I do not have that kind of cash available. Then you sell your properties, Wade said coldly. You liquidate your investments. You drain every account and cash in every asset. Because if you do not, copies of these ledgers go to the Sacramento police, to the territorial governor, and to every newspaper between here and San Francisco. Your life as you know it ends. Eleanor watched Haverton's face as the reality of his situation sank in. Part of her felt a savage satisfaction at seeing him squirm. Another part, the part her father had raised to believe in mercy, felt almost sorry for him. Almost. "And if I do return the money?" Haverton asked finally. "Then you leave San Andreas and never come back," Wade said. "You disappear, change your name, start over somewhere else. But you do it without stolen money and without hurting anyone else." "You are letting me go?" Haverton looked stunned. "I am giving you a chance to make things right," Wade corrected, "which is more than you gave any of the people you stole from. Take it or face the law, your choice." Eleanor expected Haverton to argue, to bluster and threaten, but instead he simply nodded, all the fight draining out of him. "I will need a few days to gather the funds." "You have until Saturday," Wade said. 3 days. Every person you stole from gets repaid in full, with 10% extra for the trouble. Miss Price here will verify the amounts against your real ledger. And Haverton, if you try to run, if you try to hide any assets, if you fail to make this right, then these documents go public and you spend the rest of your life in prison. Are we clear?" "Clear," Haverton whispered. They left him there, slumped in his chair like a puppet with cut strings. Outside, the night air felt clean and cool after the suffocating atmosphere of the bank. Eleanor found she was shaking, adrenaline and relief and lingering anger all coursing through her. "You did good in there," Wade said, and his hand settled gently on her shoulder, steadying her. "Kept him talking just long enough. We would not have found everything without that time." "Will he really pay everyone back?" Eleanor asked. "Or will he run?" "He will pay," Samuel Cooper said with certainty. "I know his type. Cowards who are more afraid of public shame than anything else. He will gather the money because it is easier than facing what comes if he does not." James Chin nodded agreement. "My family will have their savings returned. My sister can have her wedding." The gratitude in his voice made Eleanor's throat tight. She had helped make this happen, had been brave enough to walk into that bank and face Haverton down. For the first time since reading that terrible ledger this morning, she felt like herself again. "Go home, get some rest," Wade said to Samuel and James. "Saturday morning, we all meet at the bank and make sure everything is square. Spread the word to the others he stole from. Everyone deserves to know their money is coming back." The two men left, and suddenly Eleanor was alone with Wade Edwards in the quiet darkness behind the general store. She realized he was still touching her shoulder, realized she did not want him to stop. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing me, for helping me, for all of it." "Nothing to thank me for," Wade said, but his hand squeezed gently before falling away. "You would have found a way to fight back regardless. I just helped speed things along." "I am not sure that is true, but I appreciate you saying it." Eleanor studied his face in the dim light spilling from the nearby saloon. "Your sister, does she know you are here?" "Sent her a telegram this morning when I rode into town," Wade said. "Told her I was finally going to make things right. With Haverton paying back what he stole, she can come home if she wants. Open that dressmaking shop she always dreamed about." Eleanor's heart jumped. She is a seamstress too? Was learning to be before she lost everything and had to leave. Wade's expression was distant, clearly seeing someone else. "She is good with her hands, always has been. Our ma taught both of us to sew. Actually, said even cowboys need to know how to mend their own clothes." The image of this tall, dangerous cowboy sitting with a needle and thread made Eleanor smile despite everything. "I would like to meet her. If she comes back to San Andreas, maybe we could work together. I have been thinking about expanding, and another skilled seamstress would be welcome." Wade's attention snapped back to her, and something warm kindled in his eyes. "You would do that? Offer her work, just like that?" "Why not? We both know what it is like to be cheated by Haverton. We both know how hard it is for women to make their own way out here. If she is half as brave as her brother, I imagine we will get along fine. For a moment, Wade just looked at her, and Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with embarrassment. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face into something almost boyish. She will like you, he said. I already do. The words hung between them, simple and honest and full of possibility. Eleanor knew she should say something, should laugh it off or change the subject, but she found she did not want to. Wade Edwards had appeared in her life at her lowest moment and offered not just help, but hope. He had treated her like an equal, like someone worth fighting beside, and that meant more than she knew how to express. I should get home, she said instead. It has been a long day. I will walk you, Wade said immediately. Streets are not safe this time of night. They walked together through San Andreas, past the glowing windows of saloons and the shadowed storefronts of businesses closed until morning. Eleanor was intensely aware of Wade beside her, the solid presence of him, the way he positioned himself between her and any potential threats. When they reached her shop, with her living quarters in the rooms above, she found herself reluctant to say goodbye. Will I see you again before Saturday? She asked. I am staying at the boarding house on 5th Street, Wade said. But yes, I thought I might stop by tomorrow. Make sure Haverton has not tried anything stupid. Plus, I would like to know more about you, Eleanor Price. About how a seamstress ends up brave enough to confront a corrupt banker in his own territory. The use of her first name sent a pleasant shiver through Eleanor. And I would like to know more about Wade Edwards, about how a cowboy ends up as skilled at investigation as any Pinkerton detective. Not much to tell, Wade said, but he was smiling again. Just a man who loves his sister and hates seeing good people get hurt. I think there is a lot more to tell, Eleanor said softly. But I suppose we have time to learn. All the time you want to give me, Wade said, and there was a question in the words, an offer of something more than just allies against a common enemy. Eleanor made a decision then, one based on instinct and hope, and the way her heart lifted when Wade smiled. Come by for lunch tomorrow. I will make something and we can talk properly, without thieves and ledgers and legal troubles hanging over us. Wade's smile widened into something incandescent. I would like that more than anything. What time? Noon. I close the shop for an hour anyway. Noon it is. Wade tipped his hat to her, a gesture both formal and warm. Sleep well, Eleanor, and lock your doors. Haverton is beaten, but that does not mean he is not dangerous. Eleanor promised she would, then climbed the stairs to her rooms above the shop. Through the window, she watched Wade walk away into the night and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. Tomorrow she would make lunch for a handsome cowboy. Saturday she would get her savings back. And after that, maybe, just maybe, there would be space in her carefully constructed life for something unexpected and wonderful. She fell asleep thinking about creekwater eyes and calloused hands and the sound of Wade's voice saying her name like it mattered. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and Eleanor woke with energy she had not felt in months. She dressed carefully, telling herself it had nothing to do with Wade's promised visit, then went downstairs to open the shop. Mrs. Chen was her first customer, coming in to check on her daughter's wedding dress, and Eleanor was able to tell her the good news about the savings. Mr. Edwards found proof? Mrs. Chen asked, her eyes filling with tears. We will get our money back? Every penny, Eleanor confirmed. By Saturday morning, everything Haverton stole will be returned. Mrs. Chen grabbed Eleanor's hands, pressing them between her own. Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to stand against him. My husband did not want to make trouble, said we should accept the loss, but that money was for our daughter's future. You will have it back soon, Eleanor promised, and your daughter's dress will be ready on time. I have been working on it every evening. After Mrs. Chen left, Eleanor found herself watching the clock, anticipating Wade's arrival with an eagerness that made her feel like a girl half her age. She told herself to calm down, that this was just a friendly lunch, nothing more. But her heart did not believe her head, and when noon finally approached, she hurried upstairs to the small kitchen in her living quarters to prepare the meal. She had made chicken stew and fresh bread, simple fare but filling, and had even splurged on a small apple pie from the baker down the street. The table was set, the windows open to let in the spring breeze, and Eleanor was just beginning to wonder if she had made a mistake when she heard boots on the stairs. Wade knocked, then entered at her call, his hat in his hands and a bouquet of wildflowers somewhat awkwardly clutched in the other. Picked these on my way over. Figured every lady likes flowers. Eleanor took the bouquet, touched beyond words. They are beautiful. Thank you. She found a jar to use as a vase, while Wade stood in her modest sitting room, looking around with open interest. His presence seemed to fill the space, making it feel smaller and warmer at once. "Smells amazing," he said as she invited him to sit at the table. "I have been living on trail rations and boarding house food for so long, I almost forgot what real cooking smells like." They ate together, and conversation flowed more easily than Eleanor had dared hope. Wade told her about the cattle drives he had been working, about the long days in the saddle and the camaraderie of the other cowboys, about sleeping under stars so thick they looked like spilled salt. Eleanor told him about building her business, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with her own hands, about the challenge of being taken seriously as a woman business owner. "You ever think about leaving San Andreas?" Wade asked as they finished the stew. "Going somewhere bigger where there might be more opportunities?" Eleanor considered the question. "Sometimes, but this is home now. I built something here and I am not ready to give that up." "What about you? Do you plan to stay? Or will you head back to the cattle trails once your sister is settled?" Wade was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the table. "I've been thinking about that. Truth is, I am tired of drifting. I am 32 years old, and I have spent the last decade moving from place to place, never putting down roots. Part of that was running from bad memories. My parents died when I was 20, and it seemed easier to keep moving than to face an empty home. But lately, I have been wondering if maybe it is time to stop running." "What would you do if you stayed?" Eleanor asked softly. "Not sure yet. I am good with horses, good with cattle. Maybe start a small ranch, breed working stock. There is land available outside town if a man has the money and the will to work hard." Wade looked up at her, and his gaze was intense. "But I will be honest, Eleanor. The reason I am thinking about staying has a lot to do with a certain seamstress who is brave enough to stand up to corrupt bankers and kind enough to offer my sister a job." Eleanor's breath caught. "Wade, too fast," Wade said immediately. "I am sorry. I should not have said anything. We just met yesterday, and here I am talking about staying in town like some lovesick fool." "You are not a fool," Eleanor said firmly. "And you are not moving too fast. I have been thinking about you since last night, wondering if I was imagining the connection I felt. But I do not think I was imagining it." Wade reached across the table, his hand open in invitation. Eleanor placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength there, the gentle way he cradled her fingers like they were something precious. "I do not know what this is," Wade said quietly, "but I would like to find out if you are willing. No promises, no rushing into anything, just two people getting to know each other and seeing where it leads." "I would like that too," Eleanor whispered. "Very much." They sat there holding hands while the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, and Eleanor felt something bloom in her chest that was brighter and sweeter than anything she had felt in years. This man, this unexpected cowboy with his honest eyes and protective nature, made her want to take chances she had long since given up on. The rest of the week passed in a blur of anticipation and growing closeness. Wade came by the shop each day, sometimes to help with heavy lifting or repairs, sometimes just to sit and talk while Eleanor worked on her sewing. They walked together in the evenings, exploring San Andreas and learning each other's histories, dreams, fears. Eleanor discovered that Wade loved to read, that he carried a battered copy of Shakespeare's sonnets in his saddlebag and could recite whole passages from memory. Wade learned that Eleanor had once dreamed of being an opera singer before practical necessity had led her to the seamstress trade, and that she still sang while she worked when she thought no one could hear. By Friday evening, the space between them felt charged with possibility and unspoken feelings that were growing harder to ignore. They sat on the steps outside her shop, watching the sun set behind the hills, and Wade's arm was around her shoulders in a way that felt both thrilling and perfectly natural. "Tomorrow we make Haverton pay," Wade said. "And then what?" "Then I get my savings back and can keep my business running," Eleanor said. "Then James Chen's family can give their daughter the wedding she deserves. Then your sister can come home and we can talk about opening that expanded shop. Then life goes back to normal." "Does it?" Wade asked, turning to look at her. "Because I do not think anything is going back to how it was before. At least I hope it does not." Eleanor met his gaze, seeing her own hopes reflected there. "What are you saying, Wade Edwards?" "I am saying that I came to San Andreas to settle a debt and help my sister. But I am staying because of you. I am staying because in 3 days you have become more important to me than anything else. And I know that is crazy. I know people will say we are moving too fast. But Eleanor, when I look at you, I see everything I have been searching for without knowing I was searching." Eleanor's eyes stung with tears. But they were good tears, joyful tears. "I see it too. I feel it too. And you are right, it is crazy. But maybe crazy is exactly what we both need." Wade cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had spilled over. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," Eleanor breathed, and then his lips were on hers, soft and sure and perfect. The kiss was everything a first kiss should be, tender and searching, full of promise and barely restrained passion. Eleanor's hands came up to grip Wade's shoulders, anchoring herself as the world seemed to tilt and realign around this moment, this man, this impossible and wonderful thing blooming between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Wade rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you, Eleanor Price. I know it is too soon to say it, but it is the truth, and I am tired of not saying true things." "I am in love with you too," Eleanor whispered. "And you are right. It is too soon, and people will think we are insane. But I do not care. Life is too short and too hard out here to waste time when something feels this right." They kissed again, deeper this time, and Eleanor felt like she was falling and flying all at once. When Wade finally walked her upstairs and said goodnight at her door with one last, lingering kiss, she floated into her rooms feeling drunk on happiness and hope. Saturday morning arrived with tension crackling in the air like a coming storm. Eleanor dressed in her best walking dress and met Wade outside the bank at 9 o'clock. Samuel Cooper and James Chen were already there, along with a dozen other people whose savings Haverton had stolen. They stood together in a silent, determined group, and when Haverton arrived to open the bank, his face went pale at the sight of them. "You have what we came for?" Wade asked, his voice carrying authority. Haverton nodded jerkily. "Inside, everything is ready." They filed into the bank, and Eleanor watched as Haverton produced stack after stack of bills and coin, counted out according to the amounts recorded in his real ledger. James Chen verified each transaction, his mathematical mind catching every discrepancy. It took 2 hours, but by the time they finished, every person who had been cheated had their money returned, plus the extra 10% Wade had demanded. When Eleanor's turn came, Haverton could barely look at her as he counted out $2,200. "Miss Price, your full amount with interest." Eleanor took the money, checking the count carefully. It was all there, every penny and more. She looked at Haverton and saw a broken man, someone who had destroyed himself through greed and dishonesty. Despite everything, she found she could not hate him anymore. She just felt tired and grateful it was over. Leave town today, Wade said when the last person had been repaid. And Haverton, do not ever do this to anyone else, because next time there will not be mercy. Next time there will just be justice. Haverton nodded and fled to his office to pack his personal belongings. The crowd outside erupted in cheers and thanks, people hugging each other and crying with relief. Mrs. Chen embraced Eleanor, thanking her over and over. Samuel Cooper shook Wade's hand with tears in his weathered eyes. James Chen stood straighter than Eleanor had ever seen him, pride and satisfaction written clear on his face. "We did it," Eleanor said to Wade as the crowd dispersed. "We actually did it." "You did it," Wade corrected. "You are the one who had the courage to fight back. I just followed your lead." Eleanor laughed, giddy with relief and triumph. "That is not how I remember it, but I will let you be modest if you want." Wade caught her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Come with me, I want to show you something." He led her through the town and out past the last buildings, toward the rolling hills that marked the start of ranch country. They walked for perhaps 20 minutes until they reached a small valley with a creek running through it, green grass covering gentle slopes, and oak trees providing shade. "I bought this yesterday," Wade said quietly. "Used most of the money I saved from the cattle drives. 200 acres, water rights included, good grazing land. I am going to build a ranch here, Eleanor. Raise horses and cattle, make something lasting." Eleanor looked around at the beautiful land, seeing it through Wade's eyes, seeing the home he wanted to build. "It is perfect. I hope so because I bought it for us." Eleanor turned to stare at him. "Wade, what are you saying?" Wade pulled something from his pocket, and Eleanor's heart nearly stopped when she saw the ring. It was simple, just a gold band with a small diamond, but it was beautiful. "I know we have only known each other a week," Wade said, dropping to one knee in the grass. "I know people will say we are rushing, but Eleanor, I have spent 10 years drifting and never feeling like I belonged anywhere. Then I met you, and suddenly, everywhere I want to be is wherever you are. Marry me. Help me build this ranch into a home. Grow old with me right here in this valley. Say yes, even though it is insane." Eleanor's vision blurred with tears, and she dropped to her knees in front of him, taking his face in her hands. "Yes, yes, it is insane and too fast, and people will talk. But yes, Wade Edwards, I will marry you. I will build a life with you. I will love you for whatever time we get in this world." Wade slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise and a beginning all at once. They knelt there in the grass while the creek sang its way over the stones and the oak trees rustled overhead, and Eleanor felt more certain of this moment than she had felt of anything in her entire life. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in San Andreas. Wade's sister Sarah arrived in time for the wedding, and Eleanor gained not just a husband, but a friend and business partner. Sarah Edwards was small and fierce, with the same creek water eyes as her brother and hands that could create miracles with needle and thread. She moved into Eleanor's shop and helped expand the business, and the two women became as close as true sisters. The ranch took shape slowly, built with Wade's labor and Eleanor's savings, and the shared dreams of two people who had found each other against all odds. They built a house first, small but sturdy, with a wide porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set. Then came a barn, corrals for the horses Wade bought and began training, a chicken coop that Eleanor filled with laying hens. Life settled into a rhythm that was both peaceful and full. Wade worked the land during the day, while Eleanor and Sarah ran the dress shop in town. In the evenings, Eleanor would ride out to the ranch, and she and Wade would work together on whatever project demanded attention. At night, they would fall into bed exhausted and happy, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about the future they were building. A year after they married, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. Wade cried when she told him, great heaving sobs of joy that he tried unsuccessfully to hide. He became even more protective than usual, constantly worrying about her health, making her promise not to lift anything heavy or work too long hours. I am pregnant, not made of glass, Eleanor would protest, but she loved his concern, loved the way he talked to her growing belly at night, telling their unborn child stories and singing songs that were more enthusiasm than melody. Their son was born on a cool autumn evening in 1883, with Sarah attending as midwife and Wade pacing anxiously downstairs. They named him Thomas, after Eleanor's father, and he had Wade's dark hair and Eleanor's gray eyes. Wade held his son for the first time with hands that shook and tears streaming down his face, and Eleanor fell in love with him all over again, watching this strong cowboy turn to mush over a baby. Life continued, full and rich. The ranch prospered as Wade's reputation for training quality horses spread throughout California. The dress shop thrived under Eleanor and Sarah's joint management, and they took on two apprentices to help with the growing business. Thomas grew from baby to toddler, running around the ranch on sturdy legs, following his father everywhere and chattering constantly. When Thomas was 3, Eleanor found herself pregnant again, and this time the baby was a girl. They named her Rose, and she was tiny and fierce from the moment she drew breath. Wade was just as besotted with his daughter as he had been with his son, and Eleanor would often find him sitting in the rocking chair with Rose in his arms, singing her the same off-key songs he had once sung to Thomas in the womb. The years passed in a blur of joy and hard work and small moments of perfect contentment. Eleanor would sometimes stop in the middle of her day, wherever she was, and just marvel at the life they had built. From the ruins of her stolen savings and the anger of Wade's protective fury, they had created something beautiful and lasting. Sarah married James Chin 5 years after Wade and Eleanor's wedding, and the two families became intertwined in ways that strengthened them both. The Chin family restaurant and the dress shop often collaborated on events, and Thomas and Rose grew up playing with James and Sarah's children. By the time Eleanor turned 40, she had everything she had ever wanted and many things she had never known to want. A thriving business that she now owned jointly with Sarah. A ranch that had grown to 500 acres with quality horses sought after throughout the territory. Two beautiful children who were growing up strong and confident. And Wade, always Wade, her partner and love and best friend, who still looked at her like she was the most amazing thing in the world. They were sitting on the porch of the ranch house one evening, watching the sun set behind the hills in a blaze of orange and gold, when Wade reached over and took her hand. "You remember the day we met?" he asked. "Of course," Eleanor said. "The worst day of my life until you showed up and made it the beginning of the best." "I was so angry when I rode into town that day," Wade mused. "Angry at Haverton, angry at a world that let men like him hurt good people. Then I saw you standing there with tears in your eyes, trying so hard to be brave, and everything changed. I knew, right then in that moment, that you were going to be important to me." "Love at first sight?" Eleanor teased gently. "Something like that," Wade said. "Or maybe recognition. Like my soul knew yours and was just waiting for the rest of me to catch up." Eleanor squeezed his hand, these calloused fingers that had held her through joy and sorrow, through 2 births and countless everyday moments. "I love you, Wade Edwards. I loved you when you were just a stranger offering to shoot a banker for me, and I love you now, and I will love you until the day I die." "Longer than that," Wade said firmly. "I will love you beyond death, into whatever comes after. You are it for me, Eleanor. You always were from that very first moment." They sat together as the stars came out, as they had sat together thousands of evenings before and would sit together thousands of evenings more. Inside the house, they could hear Thomas and Rose arguing about something, their voices carrying through the open windows. The horses moved peacefully in their corrals, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the rising moon. Eleanor thought about that terrified woman standing outside the bank in San Andreas, thought about how she could never have imagined this future. She thought about the banker who had stolen her savings and inadvertently given her everything she had ever wanted by bringing Wade into her life. She thought about courage and justice and the way love could bloom in the most unexpected places. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Wade asked. "For being brave enough to help a stranger, for making Haverton make it right, for loving me enough to build all this." Eleanor gestured at the ranch, the house, the life they had created. Wade pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Thank you for being brave enough to trust me, for saying yes when I asked you to marry me after only a week, for giving me a home when I had been wandering for so long." They stayed there on the porch until full dark, wrapped in each other and contentment, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, knowing that whatever came, they would face it together. The cowboy and the seamstress, who had started with nothing but anger and courage and had built an empire of love. Years continued to roll past, each one bringing its own blessings and trials. Thomas grew into a young man who shared his father's way with horses and his mother's careful attention to detail. He took over more and more of the ranch operations as Wade's joints began to ache with age. Rose proved to have a gift for business and numbers, and she became Sarah's partner in the dress shop when Eleanor decided to step back and spend more time at the ranch. Wade's hair went gray, then white, but his eyes remained the same creekwater color, and they still lit up every time Eleanor walked into a room. Eleanor's hands grew gnarled with arthritis, making it harder to sew, but Wade would warm them between his palms on cold mornings, and she could still manage small projects that brought her joy. They had grandchildren, 7 in total between Thomas and Rose's families, and the ranch house was always full of noise and laughter and tiny hands reaching for treats. Wade built a larger porch so everyone could sit together for Sunday dinners, and Eleanor supervised the cooking with the help of whichever grandchildren were old enough to be useful in the kitchen. On their 30th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and the community they had helped build, Eleanor and Wade renewed their vows. Thomas had built a small gazebo down by the creek for the occasion, and they stood there in the golden afternoon light, while Sarah, elderly now but still fierce, officiated. "I, Wade Edwards, take you, Eleanor Price Edwards, to be my wife for the next 30 years, and all the years after that. I promise to love you when you are impossible, to hold you when you are sad, to make you laugh when you are taking life too seriously. I promise to keep building our life together one day at a time until there are no more days left to build. I, Eleanor Price Edwards, take you, Wade Edwards, to be my husband for all the time we have left and beyond. I promise to believe in you when you doubt yourself, to stand with you against whatever comes, to love you with everything I am. You saved me once, on a dusty street in San Andreas, and I promise to save you right back every single day." Their family cheered, and the grandchildren threw wildflowers, and Wade kissed Eleanor like they were 24 and 32 again, standing in a valley and making promises that seemed impossible but came true anyway. They grew old together in the house Wade had built, on the land they had claimed as their own. Eleanor's shop became the most respected dress establishment in Central California, and horses from the Edwards Ranch were sought after from Sacramento to Los Angeles. But more than the business success, more than the money or property or reputation, they had built something rarer and more precious, a love that sustained them through everything, that grew deeper with each passing year, that proved every day that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. Wade passed first, at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep with Eleanor beside him. She held his hand and felt his last breath against her cheek, and though her heart shattered, she also felt grateful. Grateful for 46 years of marriage, for a life full of love and purpose, for this man who had appeared when she needed him most and stayed through everything that followed. Eleanor lived 3 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp and funny and full of stories about the old days. She told them about the banker who stole her savings, about the cowboy who made him make it right, about falling in love in a week and building a lifetime from that foundation. Was it real? Rose asked her once toward the end. Could people really fall in love that fast? It was real, Eleanor said with certainty. When it is right, your father and I knew from the very beginning. Everything else was just details. Eleanor died on a spring morning, much like the one when she had first met Wade, with sunlight streaming through her windows and wildflowers blooming in the valley. Her last thought was of Wade waiting for her, of his hand reaching out to help her stand, of walking together into whatever came next. They buried her next to Wade in the small cemetery on the edge of their ranch, under the oak trees he had once pointed out when this land was just a dream. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, but also a line that Eleanor had requested. Here lie two souls who found each other against all odds and loved each other through everything. The ranch and the shop continued, passed down through generations who remembered the stories and honored the legacy. But more than property or business, Wade and Eleanor left behind something infinitely more valuable. Proof that courage and justice and love can transform even the darkest moments into the beginning of something beautiful. In San Andreas, California, in the rough and tumble years of the Wild West, a seamstress lost everything to a banker's lies. But a cowboy made the banker make it right, and in the process, two lonely souls found their way home to each other. They built a life that mattered, raised a family that thrived, and proved that sometimes the best revenge against those who wrong you is to take what they tried to destroy and turn it into something magnificent. Their love story became legend in San Andreas, told and retold by generations who followed, a reminder that in a hard land where survival was never guaranteed, the greatest victories came not from violence or vengeance, but from standing up for what was right, fighting for those who needed help, and having the courage to believe in love, even when logic said it was too soon, too fast, too impossible. Wade and Eleanor Edwards lived and loved and left the world better than they found it. And really, what more could anyone ask from a life? The ranch still stands, run now by Eleanor and Wade's great-great-grandchildren, who tend the land and train horses and sometimes sit on that porch in the evening, watching the sun set behind the hills. The dress shop Sarah and Eleanor founded is now a boutique that ships designs throughout California, and the name Edwards is still synonymous with quality and integrity. But the real legacy, the one that matters most, lives in the stories passed down through generations. Stories about a time when a banker's greed met its match in a seamstress's courage and a cowboy's determination. Stories about justice and redemption and the wild, beautiful chance of falling in love at first sight. Stories that remind each new generation that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually beginnings in disguise, doorways to futures we never could have imagined but always secretly hoped for. And somewhere, in whatever place souls go when their earthly work is done, Eleanor and Wade are still together, still holding hands, still building a life one moment at a time, proving that true love really does last forever.